Well, as mentioned earlier, yesterday I spoke to Mr. Daniel Johanna, CEO of the Millennium Challenge Corporation, about the functions of the aid agency. This is what he had to say. Good day, Mr. Johannes. Welcome to Good Morning Namibia. Today we are talking about the MCC, that's the Millennium Challenge Corporation, and we know that it was established in 2004 as basically as a foreign aid agency to help lead the global fight against poverty and so on. Let's look at some of the projects that are targeted under this program.
Glad to be here. A lot of our investments are primarily chosen by our partner countries themselves. For example, in Africa, where we have $5.6 billion investments, approximately 70% of those investments are targeted towards agriculture and infrastructure, which are key areas for trade investment-related activities.
Mm-hmm. And which countries are these? Are there specific countries that you are targeting? Is it only African countries? Is it countries that are meeting a certain criteria? Or what is it that you look at when you decide that you are going to give aid to this specific country?
Our decisions are based, we work with poor countries, but those that are well governed. So, for example, 50% of our compact countries are in Africa. The other 50% are concentrated in Latin America, Asia, and in Eastern Europe. Mm-hmm. And the decisions are made primarily based on 17 different policy indicators concentrated in good governance, economic freedom, and investing in people. And countries that are selected must pass the majority of those policy indicators because they could be considered eligible for our program.
Mm-hmm. Now, since its establishment in 2004, would you say that some or most of your objectives have actually been met? Are you satisfied?
Our investments are for 5 years. They must be completed within 5 years. We only worked with 22 different countries. As I had mentioned earlier, we're extremely selective.
Worldwide, right?
Worldwide, right? And we have 4 countries that have completed their first 5-year compact program. And based on early data, we are seeing significant results. Keep in mind, all of these projects are chosen by our partner countries. Mm-hmm. They themselves are responsible for identifying the constraint economic growth. They're responsible for the design of the programs. They are responsible for the implementation of the programs. We only have 2 people on the ground, so most everything is done by our partner countries. And that's what makes it very unique and different, because the whole thing is on country ownership.
Mm-hmm. So basically the MCC's role at the end of the day is to provide the funding for some of these projects to be executed, carried out?
We provide the funding primarily, yes, but it's also managed by a local board, which would consist of people from civil society, NGOs, businesses, and governments. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So everything is done by local management.
Okay. So you have mentioned that so far you have worked with about 22 countries, right? Correct. And 4 countries have already completed their terms. But what about the rest? Was there any progress? What are the challenges that comes with this?
Well, there are a lot of challenges, of course, and not all signed at the same time. So the one that completed are those that completed, those that signed earlier, and they have, for example, we have 2-3 more that are going to be completing their program this year, and then we have a number of them that will be completing next year. So depending when you sign the compact, but it must be done within 5 years. Our funding is committed for 5 years, and the challenges are normal because many of these investments are primarily concentrated in infrastructure-related activities. For example, Benin, which would complete its compact in September of this year, have chosen to invest part of its investment in extending and making their ports much bigger. Cape Verde was the first African country to have completed the program, and they also concentrated on the expansion of the port. Mali, a West African landlocked country, is also using part of its investment in expanding its international airport in Bamako. So it all depends based on their needs. And of course, when you deal with infrastructure projects, you do have some challenges because you want to make sure these complete on time. Mm-hmm. But 4 of the countries that have completed their compact so far, they all have done it on time, on budget, accomplishing most of the objectives. They have not left anything behind.
Yeah, yeah.
They spent all the money, right? Which is key because we don't want to leave anything behind.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, Mr. Johannes, they're saying that under the MCC we are having two programs. That's the compact and the threshold programs. What are the difference between the two? Perhaps you can just tell us how each one works and how they are awarded to the respective countries.
The threshold program is for countries that are close but not fully eligible. So it's primarily designed to help them become eligible. The compact is for those countries that have passed all of the policy indicators and governance, economic freedom, and investing in people.
Can you give us a couple of examples, especially when it comes to the threshold? I'm quite curious to know that.
I think the threshold program, for example, some countries have used the fund primarily to strengthen the control of corruption. And approximately, in fact, 85% of the funds have been used primarily in that sector. But the other compacts have been used primarily, like I said, in Africa, is about 65 to 70% in infrastructure and agriculture-related investments, and a portion of it in energy. So it kind of varies from country to country. It's based on their needs and based on the investment ability to generate additional income for our partner countries. For example, we have already invested or committed to invest about $8.5 billion with our partner countries. And those $8.5 billion are expected to generate about $12.5 billion in additional income for our partner countries, which could have a significant impact in terms of the ability to have additional income. And that's how we measure our success at the end of the day, is based on the investment's ability to generate additional income. And we are the only agency that measures results based on the investment's ability to generate additional income.
Well, we have actually noticed that the MCC's emphasis is on finding solutions, country-led solutions rather. Perhaps you could explain to us why it's so important for the communities themselves to be involved in, some of these projects that are funded under the MCC.
Again, this goes back to our emphasis on country ownership model. We don't want to tell you where to invest, how to invest it. We want to make sure that the entire country is consultant when a government makes a proposal to submit, projects to MCC. And so that's one of the requirements, to make sure that everyone is consulted. The reason being is we want the entire country to have ownership of those investments, because usually what happens is if it's directed by one person or two people in government, then if the countries do not have ownership of those programs, it's always very difficult for it to be very successful. But this is primarily based on the country's needs. These are projects that are extremely critical to the entire population, based on the ability, again, to generate additional income, to improve, to remove the constraint to economic growth. Though that's why they're very much owned by the entire society, and that's why we've had some successes in all of the countries that have completed their program, because they were country-owned from the beginning.
So if a country doesn't complete its program within the 5 years, what happens then?
They lose the money.
They lose the money.
They must complete it. But all of them are on track, those that are supposed to complete the next couple of years, to get it done on time, on budget, including here in Namibia.
Wow. Okay. Well, we understand that the MCC actually has certain policies that based on suspension and termination of their eligibility. What happens? Tell us a bit more about that. What leads to it for a country to actually be suspended from this aid?
Okay. Countries were selected because they did extremely well on the three major areas that we consider to be extremely critical: governance, economic freedom, and investing in people. And when we sign with our partner countries, we expect them to abide by many of the principles in which in the first place that they qualified for. So for example, Madagascar is a classical example. Madagascar was the first country to have signed a compact with the Millennium Challenge Corporation. But we had to terminate the compact after the forced change of government. So we take our responsibility very seriously if countries do not abide by the same principles in which they were qualified in the first place. that in some cases we have suspended, terminated, or put funds on hold. Again, when MCC was created in the first place, it was based on the premise that it is more effective when you work with government that are accountable for their people. And that's why we put a lot of emphasis on good governance, a lot of emphasis on economic freedom, a lot of emphasis on investing in people.
Well, the MCC has been in existence for 7 years right
Correct.
now. Oh, my math is serving me right there. But when you look back, are you satisfied with what you have achieved or with the progress that you have made? Do you think that the MCC has actually had a positive impact on the people or the countries that you had assisted?
It is having a tremendous impact. And